I want to talk about the motorcycle learning curve that no one ever talks about. If you watch my other videos, you probably know I learned to ride a motorcycle at the age of 54 with no previous motorcycle experience. You think when you learn to ride a motorcycle that once you get kind of the mechanics down of it, it's going to get a lot easier. So for me, I came into this with no motorcycle experience. So I had to learn throttle and two different brakes and shifting and how to use the turn signal without honking the horn, which took me far longer than I really want to admit. But I felt like once I would get the mechanics down, I could relax and enjoy it a lot more. And it turns out that wasn't the case. I ended up, for a long time, exhausted after every ride. And I worried that I wasn't going to get better at it, that it was going to be something like, for me, things I tried, like watercolor painting, or playing piano, that these are things I tried and didn't really ever get better at and eventually gave them up. And I was starting to worry if motorcycle riding would be like that because I was so exhausted after every ride. And I'm not talking physically exhausting. Yes, that can be hard sometimes, but that depends a lot on the length of the ride or the kinds of rides you do. But I was mentally exhausted, just wiped out after every ride. And after several rides, thinking, I've kind of gotten the hang of this. Why am I not getting better? And it took me a bit to figure out why that was. And it had a lot to do with what happens when you're a rider. For me, since I started with no experience, I started in a parking lot where I'm learning how to operate the controls. I'm learning, to shift and use the clutch and the right amount of gas and to use the brakes properly and all of those things. And once I learned those things, then I was able to ride on the road. And where you start for me was I started in neighborhoods. So now I'm on these roads just through neighborhoods near me. I didn't have to go far. It's very slow speeds, but now you have to look for cars coming out of driveways or kids or dogs or any other hazards like that. So there's a whole new set of things to worry about. And everything you do on the motorcycle when you're new, it takes a lot of attention. So in the very beginning, learning how to use the clutch and the throttle and all of that takes so much focus, and using the turn signals to try to not honk that horn every time takes a lot of focus. Eventually you get better at those and they take less of your attention, but now your attention is being sucked up by cars and driveways and children running and dogs and all of those things. So now you don't have very much bandwidth to manage all of those things again. And as soon as I got comfortable there, then I moved on to actually riding on the road. Well, now I've got stop signs and stoplights and traffic, and you can have hills and potholes and all of these things to watch for. So now, even though controlling the bike took less of my bandwidth, now I've got all my focus being spent on all of these new hazards I've introduced. And as soon as I start to get comfortable on the road, pretty soon I'm going farther. Now I'm taking trips and I'm coming across lots of traffic and construction. And I made a video on that, my first ride with traffic and construction, and it was so overwhelming and nerve-wracking. And of course, again, I end up exhausted and I come home like, why isn't this getting easier? Well, from there, you start to get used to the traffic and construction. Now you're going to go even farther where you don't know the roads, and you're going to come across dirt or gravel, and you're going to come across grooved pavement and all sorts of new hazards to deal with. Once you've gotten to that point where you're traveling a lot farther from home, the things that were taking so much of your mental bandwidth are taking less now. I mean, you know how to control the bike, you know to look for potholes, and of course you're always going to look for traffic, you're always going to look for potholes, but you can do those almost instinctively without it taking so much of your focus, much the way you learned how to, use the turn signal without honking the horn, or just use the clutch and shift without thinking. Eventually keeping an eye out for other hazards, cars that might pull out in front of you, or looking for an escape route if someone does. You'll do those things without thinking, and that will clear up more of your mental bandwidth. It gets to a point where the things that once took so much of your attention now take a lot less. And once you get to that point, riding starts to become more enjoyable. At one point, as a new rider, I talked to my sister, and she's been a motorcycle rider a lot longer than I have. And she had done an iron butt, a coast-to-coast ride, East Coast to West Coast. And I knew she'd done that when she was newer as a rider, not brand new, but newer. And I asked her about it, how long it took before she did that. Not because I was interested in doing an iron butt, But because I wanted to know at what point she felt comfortable enough that riding across the entire country on a motorcycle in a very short amount of time seemed like something that would be possible. And I forget if she told me it was 2 or 3 years in. And I thought to myself, okay, so maybe in 2 or 3 years I will feel more comfortable. And I didn't know it would take as long as it did. Now, for me, it did happen my first year as a rider. There's a video out there I called Why I Ride, and it's about my trip to a lighthouse. It's an hour or two north of here. So it was my longest ride at the time. It ended up being the first one where I felt really comfortable, where I could just enjoy the ride and the blue skies and the curves in the road and all the scenery, the fresh air. This is so much fun. This is why people get motorcycles. I enjoyed that ride, and it was the first time where everything just sort of clicked into place and I wasn't constantly worried. And of course, there are always things to worry about, but they don't take so much of your emotional bandwidth that you end up exhausted from the ride. Instead, it's more of a regeneration. You feel good after the ride. And I feel like nobody talks about that. I kept feeling like I wasn't making progress because everything still felt overwhelming. But what I didn't realize was the things that used to overwhelm me didn't anymore. I was just coming across new things that were overwhelming. And that's okay. That's part of the experience of being a motorcycle rider is you get to go to new places and do new things all the time. And eventually those things become easy for you too, that you see a gravel road and be like, oh, that's fine. I do gravel. That's no problem. And so you do continue to get better, continue to learn, and become more and more able to really enjoy your rides. I do think you can get there as long as you keep riding. Now, as far as when you get there, I don't think it's the same for everyone. I think it's different, and it depends on how much you ride and how comfortable you are with your bike and how far you ride. And for me, I just kept doing harder things all the time. And I didn't think it through at first that that's why it stayed hard, because I kept coming up with new things that pushed me a little bit farther. But, and I said it in one of my videos, everything I get through makes me better. And so bit by bit, I got to be a better rider. And I don't know, as a person who came into this later in life, if I will ever think I'm a confident rider. Is there a point where I think, oh, I'm a good rider? Or am I always going to feel like a beginner rider? Maybe I do this for 10 years and still feel like a beginner. I don't know. But I will say it's nice to know that riding got to be an amazing experience. And I could always tell it was fun, but it was also exhausting. And now it's more fun than exhaustion. And that's made a big difference for me. And I just feel like everybody needs to know that with enough practice and time, you can relax into it and really enjoy it. I feel like almost everyone has a moment where they think, am I ever going to get better at this? And you just don't always realize that you already have. You've gotten better at so many things, and there are just more things to keep going and doing to get better at. I hope this video helps you. If you like it, be sure and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more adventures. Thanks for watching.